Alright, in this lecture, we're going to talk about contrast. Now, contrast is very important in creating artwork and drawings. Without contrast, you wouldn't see the difference between things, and it also would not look as appealing if you didn't have contrast in your drawings. Now, what is contrast? Well, contrast is just the difference between values. So, something that has really high contrast would be black and white. So if I do a black box right here, and I do that right next to a white box, well, there is a lot of contrast between those two colors. And so that's all contrast is. The more contrast there is, the more distance there is between the values. So for example, if I took this mid value between our midtone and our darker color, and I went ahead and I put that right here, and then let's say I took this light gray right here that's in the middle of my white and my midtone, and I added that in right next to it, like so. Well, there's less contrast between these two colors. So even though there's still contrast between them and you can tell the difference between the two, there's a lot more contrast between this white and this black. Now, in some cases, you might have no contrast at all, so it might just be one solid color, and in other cases, you might not even be able to see the contrast because it's so subtle. So let's go over an example of this. So let's say I took a gray from right here, and that was this side, so I'll go ahead and fill that in. And then let's say I took a gray from this side, so right next to it, we'll add that gray in, and it's almost going to be the same color, just barely lighter. Like so. So you can barely see that difference between those two colors, yet it's still contrast, but not very much. Now, this can be applied to any area of the spectrum of contrast. So it's not just in the middle. If we came up here to the top and we had white, and our white was next to, let's say, a really light gray, like so, there's not very much contrast between those two colors, and yet it's still up here at the top side of our value chart. Now, what about down here? It can be the same way. So if we had black, and we put that next to another color, such as this one right here that's right next to it, so again, there's still contrast there. You can just barely see it because the two values are so close to each other on the value chart. And so when you're trying to create contrast, you want to make sure that your values are far apart on the contrast chart. The closer they are, the less contrast there will be. So let's try some more examples of this. So let's say that I have a gray background, and let's say I want to create a lot of contrast between my background and my foreground object. Well, the most contrast I can create between a gray background and my foreground is by using the color black. So let's say we had a black circle